HMS Queen Mary is one of the most remembered British capital ships from the First World War, not because of its design or service history, but because of its tragic loss as it exploded at the Battle of Jutland on the 31st of May, 1916, and out of its crew of 1,275, there were either 9 survivors, resulting in 1,266 casualties, or 18 survivors, resulting in 1,257 casualties, depending on which source you go with. Unlike all of the other ships that were lost during the battlecruiser action, which was comparatively smaller to the fleet action that would occur later in the day, there was a large number of eyewitness accounts for Queen Mary's loss. And this is probably because of Queen Mary's proximity in the battle line, being the 3rd out of 6 capital ships. Now, when you're dealing with a ship that sinks as the result of a primary magazine explosion, it's very difficult for eyewitnesses to take in exactly what is occurring, because the explosion essentially envelops the ship and the wreckage is quickly covered over by smoke. And so, there was disagreement amongst witnesses as to whether the ship's amidships magazine exploded or its forward magazines exploded. This disagreement even goes down to the Queen Mary's own survivors, as Petty Officer Francis from X turret believed that the B turret's magazines exploded, while Midshipman Story believed that the Q turret's magazines exploded. What is clear from the fact that we have survivors from the X turret and from the multitude of eyewitness accounts, Queen Mary's after magazine was not reported to have exploded, and so, upon finding the wreck, it would be expected that the after end of the ship around X turret would be intact. This is also supported by Sub-Lieutenant King Hall, who was aboard HMS Southampton, and he actually provided a sketch of the Queen Mary foundering, which showed that from the after funnel to the stern frame of the ship, Queen Mary remained intact. Prior to the positive identification of Queen Mary's wreck, the wrecks of the Battle of Jutland were designated under the Military Remains Act of 1986, which would prevent further salvage work from occurring on the wrecks of Jutland. Queen Mary's wreck was positively identified by the 75th Anniversary Expedition, which was an expedition to locate several significant Jutland wrecks by the military service, and this was done in 1991. It was recognized by this expedition that a significant amount of Queen Mary's hull remained intact and was upside down. It was also surrounded by a significant amount of debris, of course caused by the magazine explosions. It was also found that Queen Mary ended up being one of the deepest wrecks of Jutland, residing at an average of 60 meters. Unfortunately, the 75th Anniversary Expedition was plagued by bad weather, and they had to cap their diving at a maximum of 50 meters, so they could not fully examine the extent of the wreckage of the Queen Mary, nor could they really positively identify any segment of the wreck they were observing. Skip forward to the summer of 2000, and an expedition led by Ennis McCartney was attempting to locate and identify all of the sunken wrecks at Jutland, and of course, Queen Mary was on the hit list, and he would first dive the Queen Mary on the 25th of July, 2000. Queen Mary's wreck would be visited in 2000, 2001, 2003, 2014, and 2015. The expedition of 2003 produced a side-scan sonar image, and the expedition of 2015 produced a multi-beam image. The results of these expeditions were extraordinary. It confirmed the 1991 observation that a large section of upturned hull was still present on the seabed, roughly 90 meters of the ship's overall 201-meter length. Unsurprisingly, the intact section of hull was the vessel's stern, spanning from the after boiler room to the stern post, just as King Hall had sketched. But during dives, it was quickly recognized that what appears to be decay on the multibeam image is actually salvage work. Much cutting had been conducted on Queen Mary's bottom to enter its X magazine to collect valuable metals. What is fascinating about this salvage work having been conducted is that Queen Mary's ammunition within the X magazine is completely visible and intact. It also became recognized that at some point during the sinking, the X turret became dislodged from its barbette and actually remains exposed on the starboard side of the upturned hull, or just to the north of the hull. The unfortunate nature of the intact section of hull also exposes that Queen Mary is still being subject to illegal salvage, with propellers going missing, along with other holes in the hull being opened and already existing holes increasing in size through clear explosive activity. Just to the northwest of the upturned hull, there is a large section of debris that has clustered into one area, and it is assumed to be an amalgamation of components from the once existing bow. Many of the components that make up this debris is unrecognizable as the result of the ship's catastrophic explosions resulting in its sinking, and salvage work that has been conducted on the wreck over several decades, since valuable materials can easily be removed from this already ripped apart section of the ship. Some of the identifiable components of the bow is its intact conning tower, which had maximum side thicknesses of 10 inches, while the roof and floor were 3 inches thick. What's extraordinary about the conning tower is that unlike many components of the wreck, it actually landed upright, and the mounting for its rangefinder is completely exposed, though the rangefinder itself is missing. One of the fascinating finds is one of the 13.5-inch turret sleeves was located mostly exposed on its side, and nearby was a 13.5-inch gun, which was resting vertically with its muzzle pointing towards the surface. Its breech was partially buried in the sand. Unfortunately, this turret cannot be identified, so we do not know whether it's A, B, or Q. The ship was also equipped with 42 Yarrow boilers, and a number of these remain largely intact, scattered around the debris field, and they have been positively identified. The unfortunate reality behind the wreck is that it does not give us any further understanding as to what exactly caused the extraordinary explosions, though many theories have been presented, ranging from flash in the main battery magazines to one of the 4-inch magazines receiving a penetration and exploding, causing a chain reaction. Like every ship that sinks as the result of a main magazine explosion, the evidence is destroyed in the explosion and all of the witnesses are killed. And so we have to use our best judgment based on available evidence from other eyewitnesses and what we can see from the wreck. And unfortunately, there's not much to see in this case. It's clear that we will never know exactly which magazine started the catastrophic explosions, but we can for certain exclude X magazine, since it's the only one that remains intact. Regardless of what started the chain reaction that put Queen Mary on the seabed, its wreck is an extraordinary piece of its history that I think is too often overlooked. It is undoubtedly one of the great markers of one of history's largest naval battles, and it is a place of great sorrow for the extraordinary number of men who gave up their lives that day. With that having been said, there's nothing more I wish to add on to this topic for today. So, if you have learned something new in this video, why not leave a like and a comment down below, and have a wonderful day.